2027, yearly increases to minimum wage would resume based on inflation. And our fiscal effects, Prop 32 could have a wide array of economic effects. Number one, higher wages. Higher minimum wage tends to push up wages for other workers. Employees making a bit more than $18 an hour would also likely see a pay increase. A higher minimum wage would likely increase business costs and decrease profits. Businesses may set a higher price for their products and services to offset decreased profits. The overall price increase from Proposition 32 likely would be smaller than 0.5%. Reduced profits to business means they will pay less tax. The decrease in tax revenue will not be more than a few $100 million each year, out of an overall revenue collection of about $200 billion each year. The number of jobs in the same state could go up or down. The change in the number of jobs would likely be less than 0.25%. State and local government costs could go up or down because Prop 32 will increase costs in some way and decrease them in others. State and local governments will have to pay higher wages, which will increase costs. But at the same time, Prop 32 will reduce the number of people enrolled in health and human service programs such as Medi-Cal. The enrollment changes would likely reduce state and local government costs. With these factors combined, state and local government costs would go up or down, and the change would not likely exceed the high hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Total state and local government spending in California is currently greater than $500 billion annually. And supporters say Prop 32 will improve the standard of living for millions of voters in California. Today, many full-time workers can't afford the cost of living in California. Prop 32 will improve the economy by making it so that people can increase spending on rent, groceries, and other basic necessities. Increased spending will create more jobs and boost local economies. Prop 32 will alleviate taxpayer burden. Taxpayers should not have to subsidize some corporations paying extremely low wages, enabling them to keep record level of profits for owners. I'm trying to get to what the opponents say. That did it, the flick of the wrist. Okay.
You have to point it to Sharon. See Sharon?
The opponents say that Prop 32 will hurt businesses, especially small businesses, and they are more vulnerable to the impact of higher operating costs. Prop 32 will result in higher prices and cause job loss. Also, Prop 32 will increase government expenses and deficits. This may result in fewer government services or increased taxes.
Sharon.
Prop 32 will increase government expenses and deficits. This may result in fewer government services or increased. Well, apparently we don't have a slide that tells you who the supporters are and who the opponents are, but I can tell you. The supporters would be Yes on California Living Wage Act, and the opponents are California Against Job Losses and Higher Prices. So, in 7 minutes.
Thanks, Helen. Okay.
All the slides haven't gotten
Okay, so some
So this is related to Prop 32, and you can see that $10 million pro and about $65,000 con. So this is not one of the biggies, but we're going to get to one of the biggies next, I think. Okay, so Proposition 33. All right, let me get my notes here. So this expands local government's authority to enact control on residential rents for residential properties. And this is one of the most complicated propositions you will ever run into. There's a lot of local laws and state laws that deal with rent control. And one of the laws is called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995. And this is a state law that basically says any single-family home or housing built after 1995 cannot be subjected to rent control. Now, think about how many properties we're talking about here. State law prevents rent control on single-family homes and housings built after early 1995. Let me at least go there. Some cities have rent control laws limiting how much landlords can increase rent. So the proposal would remove the law that prohibits rent control on single-family homes and housing built after 1995, and it would stop the state from limiting local governments from having rent control. So that is one aspect of this proposition. There are many laws nested around the Costa-Hawkins law. And so it would be impossible to go into all the nuances associated with this measure. I'm sure many of you have seen ads on TV already for Prop 33, against Prop 33. So this is one of those propositions where you need to do a little bit more reading in order to figure out what's actually being proposed here. All right. Okay, I don't understand. Sharon? Yeah. Can you run it? Sure. Okay, that's the money. But there should be something that's proponents. Okay, I'm just going to read you what supporters say. Prop 33 will allow local governments to protect renters, and local voters will be able to decide on whether and how to control rents. So part of this proposition is to put rent control in the hands of the people. So that's one of the what the supporters say. The opponents say that Prop 33 will increase costs to build housing, therefore making the state's housing crisis worse. Prop 33 will drive up costs for renters and home buyers. This is not working as advertised. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. If you look, the amount of resources being spent on Prop 33 are quite large. And you can see the pros, the Leaving in a Better Ballot Measure Committee, and renters and homeowners for rent control collectively are putting $22 million into advertising. That's what's paying for the ads on TV and the flyers you're getting in your home. The cons, okay, actually are a bit more endowed. They have collectively about $30 million going into the cons. And you can see there that the cons are the California Rental Housing Association, the California Association of Realtors, a pack of apartment associations of Greater LA, California Apartment Association, and Californians to Protect Affordable Housing. So these groups feel that Prop 33, rent control on homes built after 1995 and single-family homes would be a bad idea. So again, Prop 33 is complex and complicated, and there are various sources of information that you can go to. Cal Matters has very long analysis of this, as well as the documentation that we're going to give you when you leave. There's a pros and cons that the league put out, which also has a lot more documentation on 33. I forgot to mention that everybody, when you walked in, you got a straw ballot. And if you would be so kind to just circle how you think you might vote after listening to a discussion of Measure P, Measure Q, Prop 2032, all of these. There's also a little box that's a question mark, which is, gee, I really don't know. I need more information. I'm not really ready to say yes or no. And we're going to collect them at the end after all the talking heads are finished. And then you turn them in, and that's when you get your pot and coffee. So there's a little carrot here to, maybe carrot cake too, who knows, to help incentivize you to fill out a straw poll. What we'll do is we're not going to try to count it tonight. We're going to take it back, we're going to count, and then we're going to post the results. If you're curious, you'll be able to find it on the League Women Voters website, where we'll have the results posted. So with that, I'm going to turn to Pam for Proposition 34.
Now, I want you to keep in mind that 33 and 34 come together all the time on TV, and I really don't get why. So let me explain to you why I don't get why. Okay, so Proposition 34 has two topics in it. One is that certain healthcare providers should be required to spend 98% of revenues from a 30-year-old federal discount prescription drug program. They should spend that on direct patient care. And the second thing is, should the state be permanently authorized to negotiate Medi-Cal drug prices, which is a situation Governor Newsom has already put into place. So, there we go. Okay, so, this is very interesting.
Talking to the mic.
Talking to the mic, okay. Okay, there's only one healthcare provider in the state that qualifies according to their specifications. You have to be a healthcare provider, which is buying drugs cheaply from the state, as you are wont to do, and then using the money that you earn when you sell that at higher prices on patient care. And the only nonprofit in the state of California that is doing this is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and they're big. Let me get this one quote I brought. I found a good quote. Let me see. Governor Newsom signed the Medicare thing in 2019, so that's been going on for a while. Oh dear, that is a really good one. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the proposition does not apply to all providers. Apparently there are probably a number of providers that can buy drugs at a cheap cost and sell for a higher cost, and then take the money to use as they will for their particular nonprofit foundation. But only those that spend at least $100 million on expenses other than direct care, that also own and operate apartment buildings, and that have racked up at least 500 severe health and safety violations in the last decade qualify. Is that something? Yeah, so you can find this in places. We'll talk to us and it'll be where. And the measure would also put into law the Newsom administration policy that requires all state agencies to negotiate for lower drug prices as a single entity, but I think they're already doing that. So supporters say Proposition 34 will ensure money from the discounted drug program is used for direct-to-patient health care. And then it will also make the discount program permanent. Opponents say Prop 34 targets one healthcare provider that supports rent control. And that's serious because they're the ones doing 33. and these guys are the ones doing 34. So it's like they're at cross purposes, it's very interesting. Federal law allows profits from drug discounts to support any nonprofit mission of healthcare providers, so that's a good thing. The money that's, oh, shoot, I forgot.
You'll get to the money. You have to keep.
Money's good. Not there. Okay, yeah, so the money, you've got 23.8 million going into the pro and 535,000 in the con. And it's just interesting because the con on 34 is Stop the Revenge Initiative, sponsored by AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And they're just at cross purposes on these two particular propositions, which is interesting. So, I think that's enough. And we can always talk about these things later. Okay.
And we're here. Proposition.
You're gonna wanna get that mic closer to your mouth, sorry.
Like that.
Yeah, you can, it's very
You're
good.
not hearing
Thank you.
very well.
Well, and I'm so much taller than Pam. Proposition 35 provides permanent funding for Medi-Cal healthcare services. So, the question is, should Californians make permanent an existing tax on managed healthcare plans to provide ongoing funding for Medi-Cal and other healthcare services? It's important to know, this is a tax on managed care services like Kaiser or Anthem. May get passed down eventually to us, but it's their tax. So currently, I think we have 49 million people on Medi-Cal. So the situation, California currently imposes a tax on healthcare plans. The tax is not permanent, and it needs to be approved every few years by the California legislature and the federal government. So right now it's temporary, but this proposes is to make it permanent. So the proposal would make it permanent, and it would generate the revenue to fund medical services and other specific healthcare programs. The key provisions, are we still there? Yes. The key provisions include making the existing tax on managed healthcare plans permanent, subject to federal approval, requiring that revenues be used only for specified medical services in ways different from the current distribution of funds. These services include primary and specialty care, emergency care, family planning, mental health, and prescription drugs, prohibiting the use of these revenues to replace existing medical funding. Also capping administrative expenses and requiring independent audits of programs. The fiscal effects, according to the legislative analysis estimates, in the short term, the next few years, there will be no changes. However, beginning in 2027, increased funding for Medi-Cal and other health programs between roughly $2 billion and $5 billion annually, including federal matching funds. Increased state costs between roughly $1 billion to $2 billion annually to implement funding increases. You know, California is a big state, it's big money. Fiscal effects depend upon many factors, such as whether the legislature would continue to approve the tax on health plans in the future if Proposition 35 is not passed by the voters. So supporters say, No. Well, there are no opponents, so let's try to get up to what the supporters say. You know, this is one of those rare propositions that the Republicans and the Democrats are saying, sure. Other people are saying it's, what was your term, ballot box
Budgeting.
budgeting, more about that. So, the supporters say it protects and expands access to health care for millions of Californians, including children, low-income families, seniors, and people with disabilities. It provides dedicated, ongoing funding for critical health care services without raising taxes on individuals. It improves access to primary care, specialty care, emergency services, and mental health treatment. And it includes strong accountability measures to ensure the funds are spent as intended. So the supporters would be
What, that's a different one.
yeah.
It's the controller
Ta-da. Okay, so the organizations that are promoting this are Vote Yes on 35 and Planned Parenthood Advocacy Project, LA County, Coalition of First Responders, healthcare workers, doctors, nonprofits, and community healthcare centers and hospitals. Again, no cons on this one.
taking your water.
Okay, hopefully, okay, Proposition 36. So this is the last of the 5 propositions that were put on the ballot by voters, right? Where X thousands of voters signed petitions to get this on the ballot. So the last 5 you heard are all in that category. Okay, 36. Okay, so 36 is another one. Wow. Pay attention to the mic. Like, is it gonna bite me? Can you hear me? Yes. I have a very loud voice, even without a mic. Anyway, so Proposition 36 is undoubtedly a proposition that you've heard a lot about, or you're going to hear a lot about. And it allows felony charges and increases sentences for certain drug and theft crimes. So the question is, should California allow people to be charged with felonies for possessing certain drugs? In this case, fentanyl is called out specifically. And for thefts under $950, if the defendant has 2 prior drug or theft convictions. So the situation right now is, in 2014, a ballot measure, that was Proposition 47, I'm sure a lot of us remember that, turned nonviolent crimes like drug possession and shoplifting into misdemeanors unless someone has prior convictions for serious crimes. So Prop 36 would turn some misdemeanors back into felonies, lengthen sentences, and require some sentences to be served in prison. Most of the sentences now are served in county jails. The fiscal effects would be increased state and local costs for prisons, jails, and mental health and drug treatment, likely between tens to hundreds of millions of dollars annually. You may or may not remember that Prop 47, one of the rationales for it was to relieve crowding in state prisons, because California had some problems with the Supreme Court, who told us that we can't keep packing people into overcrowded prisons. Supporters say Prop 36 makes communities safer by holding repeat thieves accountable and making thieves and drug dealers serve tougher sentences. Opponents say Prop 36 would make California less safe by stopping crime prevention and drug treatment programs. I think the assumption here is if you're paying money to keep people in prison, then you're going to reduce the money that's available for drug treatment programs. Prop 36 would cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Okay, let's see who's pro and con here. Okay, so pro is Californians for Safe Stores and Neighborhoods. It's sponsored by the California Retailers Association. Californians for Safer Communities, sponsored by the Golden State Communities. So they have put about $10 million into advertising for this proposition. The opponents are the Committee to Protect Public Safety, sponsored by Action for Safety and Justice, and they put in about $1.3 million. So that's who's supporting it and who's opposing it and the resources that they're putting into their various positions. Okay, with that, we move on to Proposition 2. This is the first one that was put on the ballot by the legislature, okay? And because it involves bonds, it must go to the voters.
Okay, so this is a bond, and the question is, shall we sell $10 billion in bonds?
The screen.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Okay, so should we spend $10 billion in bonds to help build and repair public schools and community colleges? Change. Many public schools and community colleges need repair, renovation, and they need money from someplace to help this happen. 38% of our students are educated in substandard buildings. So there's a real need for this. And I think it was 2022, they put a $15 billion bond. Oh, that was in 2020. They put a $15 billion bond on the ballot for this purpose, and it failed. So we've been not doing well ever since. That's another 4 years of repair needs. So $8.5 billion of this money would be dedicated to K-12 schools and $1.5 billion to community colleges. The kicker here, as always, is that the state will need to spend $500 million per year for the next 35 years to repay the bonds, which comes out to $17.5 billion, I think. Yes, so it's a lot of money, and it has to come from someplace. And typically it comes from the general fund, and the general fund comes from our taxes, and so that's just a concern. While we all want our kids to be educated, and we want them in decent buildings and water, it's just something to think about. So the supporters say that the bonds will pay for the badly needed repairs and security improvements, thereby making schools and community colleges safer. And opponents say Proposition 2 makes taxpayers.
Back up,
I go too far?
Yeah, yep.
Supporters?
Keep going. Wrong way.
Opponents? Okay, everybody.
We're still on the wrong proposition.
We're on 3. We're on 3?
The controller isn't working very well.
I'm not working very well.
No, it's not.
Proposition 3. We're on 2. Don't forget.
Back up.
What?
There we go.
Okay. One more back? No, I'm going to tell you this. Opponents say that Proposition 2 makes taxpayers pay bond interest over many years. And I'm thinking many of us in here aren't going to be here when that happens, so it's 35 years out in the future. Opponents are also worried that the money will go to wasteful construction projects instead of classroom instruction. But you know that we don't have a roof over you, I'm not sure how wasteful that is. That's just an opinion. Okay, so I told you about the 38% of States buildings. Let's see. So we've got money coming in on this one. So its pro is as much as you can see there, but I can't really see. So let's see. And I don't think there's no con. So it's just supporters. Oh, right. Assemblyman Bill Asaley. But he's not giving any money to it. So, you know, there you go. But this is an interesting thing. I hope you read more about it later. Because it is, oh, that is it. There's one more thing. California does not pay for school repairs through a permanent funding stream. Many other states do that. So maybe it would be a time for us to talk to our representatives and talk about maybe getting a permanent funding stream for repairs. So this doesn't always come up like an afterthought. That's just a thought.
So this is the one I
Now you get to
promised.
raise it close to your mouth.
This is the one I promised would be short. And, I'll cut to the chase, no fiscal effects. For all that talk about billions of dollars. This is the constitutional right to marriage, and the question is, should the California Constitution be amended to define marriage as a fundamental right for all, regardless of sex or race, and remove language that states that marriage is only between a man and a woman? The situation, the California Constitution contains an outdated and unenforceable provision stating, quote, only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California, end quote. The language was inserted as a result of the passage of Prop 8 in 2008, after federal court decisions holding that the provision was unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. California has recognized same-sex marriage since that time. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the states must allow and recognize same-sex marriage. The proposal, Prop 3, would repeal the outdated language and amend the state constitution to provide the right to marry as a fundamental right, and this fundamental right is in furtherance of the rights to enjoy life, liberty, safety, happiness, and privacy, and the rights due to due process and equal protection. These amendments would protect both same-sex and interracial marriages. And the fiscal effects, no changes in revenues or costs are estimated by state or local governments. Opponents say, let's do supporters. Supporters, okay. Supporters say Prop 3 proactively protects against future attempts to restrict marriage rights to same-sex or interracial couples. The amendment aligns the state constitution with the law as it is today and affirms the freedom to marry as a fundamental right. The amendment does not change any laws regarding age requirements and number of people in a marriage or existing rights of clergy to refuse to perform a marriage. And the opponents say, good. The opponents say, because same-sex marriage is already legal, the amendment fixes a problem that does not exist. The amendment's language is unclear and eliminates all rules for marriage. Without safeguards such as age, genetic relationship, and the number of participants, the amendment opens the door to child marriage, incest, and polygamy. fact checking, there are lots against. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, Proposition 3 is simple. For more information, the supporters are Freedom to Marry, and you can go to yesonprop3california.com. The opponents are the California Family Council, californiafamily.org, Proposition 3. You'll all get copies of this.
Okey doke. Oh, we're up to 4. Cool. Pie is coming. Pie is coming. Trust me on this. Okay, Prop 4. There's only 4, 5, and 6 left. So Proposition 4 authorizes bonds for safe drinking water, wildfire prevention, and protecting communities and natural lands from climate risk. The question: should voters let the state sell $10 billion in bonds for various projects to reduce climate risks and impacts? Remember, this is a bond measure, has to go to the voters. The voters have to weigh in on this. Okay. So the situation is climate change is negatively impacting all Californians, but especially people with low incomes. The proposal is to allow the state to sell $10 billion in bonds for projects related to water, wildfire, coastal resilience, fish, wildlife, clean air, and to mitigate extreme heat. Ooh, we could use some of that up here. I'm seeing big fans blowing cold air from Eureka. Don't you see that happening? I can't believe that Elon Musk hasn't thought of this yet. Anyway, fiscal effects. The state would pay about $400 million annually for 40 years to repay the bond. Protecting natural resources could reduce costs of future damage. So for a $10 billion bond, we're going to wind up paying $16 billion. You know, just so you see the run out. Supporters say Prop 4 will help protect our communities, health, and the economy. Opponents say bonds are the most expensive way to fund government spending and should not be used. Prop 4 provides funding for improving technologies with no real evidence of success. And then if we go to the pro organizations and the con organizations, you see there's no money against this proposition and a relatively small amount of money put in by the Coalition of Environmental Advocates across California, about $600,000. Okay, on to Proposition 5. Pam.
Proposition 5, you know, there aren't any that are really drop dead simple. No. So this is not a bond, it's just how we approve bonds, which is very important. So should local bond measures to fund housing bonds for low and middle income Californians and public infrastructure projects be allowed to pass with 55% voter approval instead of the current 66.7% now requirement? So to make it easier, I guess you have to think about this in conjunction with the raise in wages. What's this one? Situation?
Yeah.
No,
It was on the right
I
page.
know, but it went with that
This is it.
one. Okay, the current law requires 2/3 of the voters to vote yes to pass local bond measures. And affordable housing is a key issue across the state. The proposal is to lower the voting requirement so that some types of local bond measures will pass with just 55% of the vote. Little effect on the state budget, but impact on local budgets, because this is where the money is going to be spent. So Supporters say Prop 5 gives local communities more tools to make housing affordable and will allow local voters to address their needs, such as housing and safe streets. Opponents say Prop 5 changes existing protections from high debt. Prop 5 pushes the cost of infrastructure onto local governments and taxpayers. I have read, as I've looked into this, that this could be a chip away at Prop 13. If this proposition passes, it will apply to all eligible November 5th propositions. So if there's anything on the ballot that would have required two-thirds vote to pass, it would now be 55% if this also passes. So, that's already, okay. So organizations who are for it have put in $2.5 million, and organizations who are against it have put in over $28 million. So that's quite a change. Let's see, is there anything else I found that's really fascinating about this? I think the impact, the potential impact on Prop 13 is something we should think about. Opponents say that this could throw the state back to the old days of rapidly rising property taxes that once threatened to oust homeowners from their homes. So, yeah. Let me see, where did I get this? KQED had an op-ed on this proposition, and that's where I got this concept about maybe it would chip away at Proposition 13. So it's just something to think about, even though it seems like a simple thing. Thanks.
We are at Proposition 6, the last one, and then we'll have to. Okay. So, Proposition 6 eliminates constitutional provision allowing involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons. The question: should the California Constitution be amended to 1. Remove the provision that allows involuntary servitude to be used as punishment for a crime, 2. Prohibit punishment for refusing a work assignment, and 3. Allow voluntary work assignments in exchange for credit to reduce sentences. And, okay, we're already in a situation. Can someone do that for me? Thank you. I do. I appreciate that. All right. So our situation currently. California's Constitution mirrors the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which allows for involuntary servitude as punishment for crimes. Although no courts explicitly order forced labor as part of criminal sentencing, it is standard practice to force incarcerated people to perform labor. California is among the 16 states with an exception clause for involuntary servitude in the state's constitution. Most recently, voters in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont removed involuntary servitude language from their state constitutions. And by the way, here's a little factoid for you. Alabama in 1898, leasing convicts amounted to 79% of their state budget. So, yeah, we have a long history of involuntary servitude. So, right now, more than 94,000 Californians are currently in state prison. Black people are disproportionately represented in the prison population, accounting to 28%, despite making up less than 6% of California's overall population. The proposal, Prop 6 would amend the California Constitution to end mandatory work assignments for state prisoners. It would make employment voluntary for incarcerated people and would protect them from being disciplined for refusing a work assignment. It would authorize credits for incarcerated people who voluntarily participate in work assignments. The fiscal effects are uncertain. Prop 6 doesn't mandate wage, and the related law that will go into effect if Prop 6 passes explicitly exempts the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from minimum wage laws. It also specifies that the compensation for work assignments will be set through regulations. The costs will also depend on whether courts require prisoners to be paid minimum wage for their work. Any potential increase or decrease in state and local criminal justice costs likely would not exceed the tens of millions of dollars each year annually. You're going to do the next slide for me? Supporters say involuntary servitude is an extension of slavery. There is no room for slavery in our Constitution, which should reflect our values in 2024. Proposition 6 prioritizes rehabilitation for incarcerated people by allowing them to choose work assignments that enable participation in programs that facilitate personal growth and transformation. Prop 6 was placed on the ballot by California state lawmakers with bipartisan support. Opponents say they are not making an argument. So, there are no official opponents. You can see the organizations that promote this are Votes on Ayes on CaliforniaProp6.com. And does it show contributions? Not there, but various social justice and civil rights organizations have donated $93,210. And with that, I give it to Joanne.
Okay, so hopefully you're still awake. That was a lot of material to cover. One thing is that when you get your ballot, you may see other things on your ballot that we haven't talked about. Well, first you'll see all the candidates for offices, right? So we've held a number of forums where we've had the candidates come and speak to you. But you'll also see measures to support various school districts, depending on where you live. I live, for example, in a school district where I've got a proposition to provide a bond funds for the Shasta Regional School District. Depending on where you live, you'll see other school districts. So that's going to be very unique. And it's one of the reasons it's really important that you vote your ballot, because the ballots are tailored to where you live, what school district you're in, whether you're in District 1 or District 2 of the Shasta County Office of Education. You're going to see a different ballot. So it's important to vote the right ballot. Just as a factoid, Shasta County for this election is going to prepare 59 different ballots. 59. And they all have to be counted individually because that's how the state wants the results reported. So you can imagine at the end of election night, the people at the elections office have a lot of work to do. They really have a lot of work to do. So with that, we're quite willing to entertain any questions you might have. Although it is one for pie, so it's a toughie right there. That's a toughie. If you have any questions, to get your pie, you have to turn in your straw ballot back there in the bucket. And then the ladies have all these pies and coffee set out for us. On your way out tonight, please take a copy of the pros and cons, which will be on the tables at the 2 doors. It has all the information that we presented, as well as more information. Plus, stapled to the back is something called